a very warm welcome to you all to this special Royal Television Society Yorkshire event, the making of BBC Eid Live online Q&A. My name's Beth Johnson. I'm Vice Chair of the RTS for Yorkshire and a Professor of Television at the University of Leeds. It's a real pleasure to be chairing this conversation today on behalf of the RTS and also as a Bradfordian. So we're here this evening to reflect on two remarkable BBC programmes that aired this past spring, Eid Live and Celebrity Eid, both filmed here in Bradford during its year as UK City of Culture 2025. So these broadcasts marked a UK first, with Eid prayers shown live on BBC One and a really joyful celebration of community and culture aired later that same day. So together, those programmes combined faith, fun and powerful representation in a way that I think we rarely see on primetime British television. But today, we're going behind the scenes to explore how this came to be, from concept to production, collaboration to impact. So we've got 45 minutes of discussion, followed by 15 minutes for questions from the audience. So a very warm welcome to you again. Please do be ready for those questions. And if you have questions, if you can please put those in the chat and we'll work through as many of those as we can after the discussion. But firstly, please let me introduce our brilliant panel today. First of all, we have Zulfi Karim, Honorary Secretary of Bradford Central Mosque, where Eid Live was broadcast. So his leadership and openness helped to make this historic broadcast possible, and the mosque community played a really central role in that. A very warm welcome, Zulfi. Next, Aaqil Ahmed, who is executive producer behind both programmes and the founder of Amplify Consulting. Based here in Bradford, Aaqil is a former head of religion and ethics at the BBC and Channel 4 and developed and pitched this project to the BBC and worked with Firecracker as a production partner to deliver it. And we also, hello and welcome, Aaqil. And we also have Daisy Scalchi, who's the BBC's head of commissioning for religion and ethics. So Daisy commissioned both Eid Live and Celebrity Eid and brings vital insight into what these programmes represent for public service broadcasting today. So please do join me in welcoming them. And I'm really happy to begin our conversation.
Thank you. Really good to be here.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first question, if I may. So this was a landmark moment for UK broadcasting. So Aaqil, as the creator and exec producer, could you start us off, please, by just talking to us a little bit about your vision for these programmes and why now? And then if we can, I'm going to move to Daisy and Zulfi also.
Yeah, I mean, it was a full-on collaboration, I have to say that, yeah. But there was not one individual. These things never are one individual, but it did start with an individual. That was me wandering around in lockdown. And actually, I had to figure out how to do Eid prayers, because for the Eid prayers are congregational. You don't really do them at home if you're a male in particular. So the fact of the matter is, I was like thinking, how are we going to do this? You know, we're in lockdown, and actually, I had to download it, and I remember did it in the garden with my family, we're all there, whatever, because that's what most people did. But it then got me thinking about what happens and what happens if this is going to be an annual thing or if it goes longer. That then turned into more of an idea rather than a kind of just for lockdown. It became actually, this is an idea, isn't it? And I kind of like started to look around, talking to lots of different people. Actually, at one point, I had Headingley lined up as a possible venue, and etc. And then eventually, I thought we had enough information and in the right kind of space to just kind of like spoke to Daisy about it. And I said, Daisy, I think this is what we should do. You know, we talked about the demographics of Muslims in the country, the percentages of them around, the fact that obviously, you know, that what that means in terms of representation. And that's why if you ask why now, sometimes these things happen for the right reason. You know, we're about a year, the conversation was happening a year or so after the analysis of the kind of census figures that kind of like give you a particularly a large number of Muslims living in the country. It's around about 6% of the UK. It's not the 20-30% that people think, but it's about 6%. And so at that point, you do have to ask yourselves, what would they expect for programs for them? But also, what does that mean for people who want to understand what Muslims are like, what they do, what happens on Eid, what goes on inside a mosque, etc. And Daisy can speak for herself, but she was very, very receptive. And at that point, then, because of all the conversations happening around Bradford, the conversation really was, we should be doing this in Bradford during the City of Culture. That's what it was. Daisy who said that. I had a difficulty in that sense because I was the broadcast consultant for the UK City of Culture, so I didn't really want to kind of push Bradford too much, but actually it was the right thing to do. And then that's where it started. And I think I should then hand over to Daisy, because then she can talk about why, after I'd started talking to her about it, why she, I suppose, thought it was the right thing to do.
Great, thanks so much, Aaqil. And Daisy, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, I mean, I think Aaqil sort of hit the nail on the head, really, talking about the collaboration. It was from the beginning something that everybody got behind and everybody gathered around and was so passionate about from the get-go. And I think for us and for me as head of religion and ethics at the BBC, it was a really exciting, unturned down ball thing to do. And something I couldn't believe hadn't been done already on live terrestrial television. So it felt like a bit of a no-brainer when you think about the country's Muslim population, as Aaqil's just said, about Bradford, City of Culture. It just felt like the right moment when all the stars have aligned to bring something like this to audiences, both who themselves may be practicing Muslims, but also who might have an interest in understanding a bit more about the faith, culture, and the practice from different faith perspectives. And so from my point of view, looking at what we need to do when it comes to religion programming to try and bring people into a shared space, both of seeing themselves reflected, but also perhaps seeing a different culture, a different faith practice playing out, it felt absolutely essential. And so I learned a lot as well doing it. And I think the team was really kind and generous with me, who doesn't necessarily know all the ins and outs, but by the end of it felt like I had really been welcomed by the Bradford community, and the team that Aaqil and Firecracker put together were second to none, absolutely brilliant, and worked around the clock to bring the two programmes to audiences. So I was really delighted to work on it, but also with the end result.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Daisy. Zulfi, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add at this point.
No, I think we've set the scene, and let's move on. I want to hear more.
Well,
no problem.
You could ask. I mean, I did actually have to phone him up cold and say I've got this idea, and he didn't tell me to get lost. So there is that as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely be coming on to more about that collaboration, how that worked in just a few questions time. But yeah, very much looking forward to that. You both yourself, Aaqil, and Daisy have mentioned Bradford City of Culture 2025 as being really important, and it clearly shaped this story. What did filming in Bradford bring to the project, and why was it important to ground it there?
Do you want Aaqil and or I to pick up on that, or?
Yes, you are both very welcome, all very welcome.
Well, again, I think from a BBC perspective, there's such a great collaboration between the organisation and the city this year. With, you'll know so many different projects happening from across the whole year, and I think to be inside Bradford and to be inviting the whole rest of the four nations into that city at such an important time, and into the mosque and into the city centre where the evening programme happened, with a whole range of different voices and local community stories, as well as people from around the country coming in. It just felt like the right place to hold such an important celebration, and also in the morning, such an important moment of reflection and prayer. And I think you could really feel that being in the city that day, just how significant this celebration, this moment is for the Muslim community, but also for the whole city. Yeah, so I love being up there. It was brilliant. Aaqil, I'm sure you'll have more to add about that.
No, I mean, I think that's the right set. I think Daisy's, spot on. It's the right kind of sentiment. I mean, I think we've got to remember as well, Bradford is, if you look at the kind of like the top five kind of locations, particularly if you split London into like major boroughs like Tower Hamlets and Newham, etc. The top five kind of areas in the country, Bradford's one of them for Muslim populations. You've got around, 2 to 250,000 kind of Muslims living in the Bradford district. So in that sense, it's really important. Of course, as well, the majority of Muslims as well living in Bradford are Pakistani. And that's the largest kind of like single group of Muslims living in this country as well. So, in that sense, if you're gonna when you're doing something for the first time, all the stars are in alignment in the sense, the city of culture is happening in Bradford, but also it's a large Muslim population and it's a significantly large Pakistani population. So doing something like this for the first time, those are the kind of I think it would feel weird for it not to be in a place like Birmingham, Manchester, or Bradford, and for it not to be in a mosque or a location where predominantly you would have Pakistani people, not because that's the only community, but it's the biggest one. So you would start with them, and then you could, if this was something you did, year on year on, then you would be able to bring in other kind of communities as well. So I think that's important. Of course, as well, the relationships that we have in Bradford are really important as well. And so the central mosque in Bradford is my go-to mosque when I'm in Bradford. And also Zulfi said yes quite early on to a conversation. And its history, its location, because it's right at the top of Westgate, it's right at the top of Bradford city centre. So you walk 30 seconds from leaving the mosque, you're walking into the city centre. You've got all of that. It's an iconic building. I mean, for many of us who've been working in it or traveling or living in and around Bradford for decades, for many years it was this kind of like building site on the top of a hill before it all got made, etc. And I think it's beautiful as well inside. And the congregation and Zulfi and the management and all the rest of it, well, they said yes. And not only did they
But
say,
you also,
sorry.
feel that you also worked really hard with Zulfi to make it feel really broad and inclusive,
Yeah.
both of the faith, but also the interfaith community that exists in Bradford is so strong. And I
Yeah.
think that was really reflected, particularly in the evening show. Um,
Yeah.
so I feel that you and the team working with Zulfi had a real eye on that as well.
No, I think that's a really good point because obviously I was focusing mainly on the daytime show, which is actually getting inside the mosque. But obviously the evening show is not inside the mosque. We did that in Bradford city centre, and as Daisy quite rightly
Right in the
said,
centre.
yeah, right. It was right in the centre in City Park, and not only that, obviously, yeah, we worked really hard to try and bring in, friends and colleagues, etc., from across the spectrum of faith or no faith, and everybody, I mean, there were some people who didn't come who who really regret that they weren't there because they couldn't make it. The Bishop of Bradford had to go somewhere else, and he obviously one of his colleagues came, but he wasn't there. And I know Toby quite well, and he's mentioned it a few times, that he wished he'd been there because he
He
felt it
missed a
was,
good party.
yeah, he's FOMO, isn't it? He missed out.
Yeah.
And it's that
Yeah.
whole kind of thing. So yeah, we did work really hard, and that was on purpose. It wasn't, and you can get that in a place like Bradford. You can get it in many places, to be fair. I know that we have to be honest about that, but particularly in Bradford, because of things that may have happened in the past, people have worked really hard, and I think Zulfi can speak more to this because of his long-term relationship as a cultural leader in Bradford. But the fact of the matter is, people want to get on together, and whether it was the Church of England, whether it was the Bishop of Bradford's team or the Sikh community or the Hindu community or the Jewish community that I mean, in the end, we had people coming from all over the place. And in fact, one of the people who came to represent Bradford's Jewish community, I think he landed that morning from his holiday. And Richard, he's not a young man anymore. I'm sure he won't mind me saying that. Zulfi knows him a lot better than I do, but he still came and he had a great time. And he was sending me photographs afterwards and asking for this person's contact name and all the rest of it, simply because they really enjoyed themselves because it encompassed all the things that they wanted things to be in that evening show, which was it was a celebration rather than a kind of the negativity that you could often get in when you're talking Bradford, but also when you're talking about British Muslims.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And I want to direct the next question to Zulfi, if I may. So, Zulfi, you welcomed the BBC into your mosque for live worship. What convinced you to say yes? And did you think about any risks to yourself and your community?
Yeah, thank you, Beth, and thank you to the RTS Yorkshire for hosting this very important conversation. To be honest, this wasn't an easy decision. After the call from Aaqil, there was a lot of work in the background. Opening the mosque doors to a live national television audience during one of the most sacred moments of our year required a huge leap of faith. And that responsibility weighed heavily. But for me, it came down to trust, both in the team at the BBC and also the importance of telling our story on our terms. For decades, British Muslims have been seen, spoken about, and too often misrepresented. And this was a chance to offer something different, a moment of reverence, beauty, and celebration. But it was something that was going to be shared directly from within the heart of our community. And I saw this as a duty to step forward, not just as a mosque leader, but as someone who believes in representation with dignity. Yes, there were concerns from some within the congregation and beyond, but in the end, the overwhelming response has been that one of pride and gratitude. And really, I do thank Aaqil and Daisy for giving us that opportunity to have those difficult conversations. And, I had to kick the tires, and on more than one occasion. And there was nervy moments because BBC were not always in the room. This was the trust that I had to put into Aaqil and his production skills. But I also think his understanding and coming from religion and ethics and working at the BBC and other broadcasters as well, I think gave me the confidence that this is somebody who's not going to take this lightheartedly and understands the complexities. And he's done amazing things in the past. And he basically sold me the fact that Daisy was very compassionate and was very keen to do the right thing. And that was important. I think it was doing the right thing. And it felt right. I think when the team got together, that trust was there. It just, like Aaqil says, about the timing and the flow and everything else, and it just felt right. And also, we're living through very challenging times at the moment. And we can all close up shop and hide away and stop this communication when it's needed more than ever. So, yeah, that's just a snapshot. I can go into it, much further about what it meant, but I think it was a big responsibility, and it weighed heavily. And I still look back, and on a Friday prayers or Eid just gone, I kind of thought, did we really do this? Did this really happen? And it did, and I'm grateful to everybody here for making it happen. And I'm so glad it was in Bradford. And just there's many mosques and many communities Aaqil has already alluded to. But there's one thing about Bradford that is really, really important, and that is that our contribution to the city goes back 80 years. And the Muslim community have been very much embedded in the civic society and the fabric of the city. And Bradford Central Mosque, when it was first designed in the late 60s by the pioneers, they very much wanted the mosque to represent the topography of Yorkshire, not just Bradford, but Yorkshire. So I hope people will want to come and visit after this, and I'm more than happy to show anybody around. But it was actually built using Yorkshire stone from a quarry, which is 10 miles away from where the mosque is now situated. And the architect was a local architect who actually grew up in Manningham. He was non-Muslim, by the way. He was a Christian. But that for us was very, very important, that we made sure that it actually was going to sit here as a mosque, not just here now, but in years to come. And the mosque is actually seen by people of other faiths and non-faiths as almost like the Muslim equivalent to the cathedral. And we are in a Bradford city centre postcode, so we're probably one of the only cathedral mosques. So it was important, and we've done a lot of interfaith work over the decades, and the relationship that Aaqil talks about with the bishop and the Jewish community and the Sikh and everybody else is because we regularly open our doors, and we have events, and we have difficult conversations, we have great parties, we break bread together. So there was a lot of work that's gone behind the scenes, which in a way made it easier for me. But then at the same time, I was carrying a huge responsibility if things went wrong.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Zulfi, and it's absolutely a beautiful building. I'm sure people will take you up on that offer to come in. And thank you as well for talking about that balance between, I suppose, editorial independence and building trust in such a sacred and sensitive context. Thank you so much. Aaqil, Daisy, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, or if you're happy for us to move on to the next question.
Well, I think it's what just quickly on that, because obviously once Zulfi was interested enough, and we had as you said, quite a few conversations. You're talking about the imam, all the people, and actually it's not just even the imam who is a young man, very very young, and a year into the job of being a spiritual leader after his kind of like revered and well respected father passed away the year before. So you've got to, the timing as was important, but also he could easily have kind of like clammed up and said, this is not for me at this moment. But he really embraced it, really embraced it. And I think actually you've got to grab moments as well. When we talk about access and having conversations around access and etc. Yes, you've got to build up a relationship. That's got to be authentic. Otherwise you can really see through it, and people can see through it. But more importantly, you grab that moment. And I think with Ramadan coming, the month just before the Eid, just before Eid, they were living in the mosque. We were all living in that mosque, weren't we, Zulfi? It felt like at times, but they actually were physically living in the mosque. The imam and his kind of like team of advisors, who were all very young people like him, and so we got the opportunity to spend time with them and build a relationship with them as well, which enabled them to run with it. By the end of it, they were running with it themselves. The conversations that we had morphed into things like, I'm going to get myself a new prayer mat because the old prayer mat looks a bit tatty, or what kind of clothing should we wear? And these young people were asking me and Zulfi, what kind of clothing should we wear? We're probably not the people to be advising them, but obviously we did. But it was that kind of relationship building that is no different to any other kind of access agreement type thing you would do. You've got to build a relationship, and you've got to, and if people like you because you're authentic in that relationship, then you can have then you can make it feel easier later on. Because there were moments where it could have collapsed, if we're honest. There were moments, because that's the nature of any kind of project. It could have collapsed at quite a few times, but we hung on because we'd built up a relationship between me, Zulfi, the Imam, the people running it, Daisy, you name it. We'd all built up that relationship. So we basically felt, no, we're going to fight for this and make sure it happened. Nothing took us off track.
Thank you. Thanks so much. We've touched on this already, but obviously there was very much a two-part approach here, both Eid Live and also Celebrity Eid. So I've obviously got my own ideas, but what did each programme offer that the other didn't? And I'm going to come to Daisy first, if I may.
I also just wanted to say to Zulfi, thanks for taking the leap of faith. The way you spoke about that was very moving, and so yeah, I'm just really delighted that you did and that you carried on taking those leaps of faith all the way through the process. And as a result, we did get these two different programs, which felt very different, and they were intended to, but as a whole, to bring, I think, the ethos and spirit of that a vital moment in the calendar together. So both time to come together with other members of the community to worship, to be prayerful, to be thoughtful, both individually and with other people, and to create a space of quiet, really. And then from there, completely opposite in the evening, it was a place of noise and chatter and food and sharing stories and inviting all sorts of people into that space and into that world. And I think the two really did achieve that feeling: quiet, prayer, reflection, worship, reverence, party, food, chat, friends, family. And yeah, and certainly viewers seem to respond really well to that. We did get some incredible feedback from audiences about both programs, who really did pick up on what you got across the whole offering. And as well as that, it's worth saying that in between those two programs, obviously one was very early in the morning, one was right at the end of the day, both on BBC One. There was a whole BBC offering wrapping around that. So there was a BBC moment for Eid, and there were interviews and conversations across various radio stations, publications. BBC homepage had articles, BBC Food had recipes. So you could really tune in onto all sorts of different platforms throughout the day and find something different that would perhaps show you something different or share something different about Eid, both the celebration and the worship.
That's great. Thanks so much, Daisy. Aaqil, Zulfi, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add there.
No, Daisy's right about the pan BBC thing. It was amazing, particularly in Yorkshire as well. But just even, Morning Live or Radio 4 or, Women's Hour. I remember, helping the young producer on Women's Hour to actually find, I had to find us some women to come on the show, whatever, to talk about. As silly as it sounds, but that was, we got, I think, Shanaz from City of Culture, the creative director of City of Culture, she came on. So it was a fantastic thing. But you're right, and Daisy's perfectly right about the evening show was meant to be something very different. And it was a fantastic celebration. And, everything, whether it be Jason Mohammed as a presenter, all the way through to, I don't know if you know this, Daisy, but I think we might have our first wedding from that show. So Adam Azim, who's the world champion boxer, got married a few weeks ago to Dua, who is from...
Yes. I did hear that literally just this week. I love that we've
either she's a better actress than I give her credit for. I'm joking. Either they're both very good actors, and we didn't have any knowledge of the fact that they knew each other on the day.
No.
But the two of them got married, Zulfi, last couple of weeks ago. So we probably have, we should have had our Scylla moment, Daisy, shouldn't we? We should have been talking.
Oh, I feel like we are. Yeah. Hopefully we contributed to their lovely romance.
But they had so much fun that night. And also Adam had fun. He wasn't meant to come, but he had fun because we had these inserts and we followed Adam and for about for a day or so during Ramadan to see how he fasts and trains as a champion, an elite athlete. And I think he had so much fun on the whole shoot. And when he saw the film back, he loved it so much. Literally at the last minute, he said, I want to come to the show in Bradford. And we had a lot of that with a lot of people who, You know, I mean, they were Daisy and her colleague Jack were teasing me a little bit by saying half the people say that they've been forced to do it because you bullied them, Aaqil, or the other half say they're doing it because you're their friend. But the joke was that actually none of them wanted to miss out. Everybody we spoke to wanted to do it, and even the singer that we had, young Harris J, you know, he'd landed from a tour in the Middle East the night before or something like that, and then came up from London to Bradford to perform, simply because him and his management said, we've got to do this because it's the first time this has ever happened. We want to be on the first ever time. And everybody, that was the atmosphere for that show. First time we want to do this. And for a lot of people, I want to be in Bradford during the City of Culture as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I know you mentioned there Jason Mohammed, who presented Eid Live, and he presented it with such warmth. I wanted to sort of say and ask, what did Jason bring to the role? How did he shape the tone of the broadcast, if you will? I thought he was a fantastic presenter.
I thought he was incredible, and the energy that he kept up throughout the whole day. You know, he started that evening as if he was fresh from a night's sleep. And I think what he brought was both a real relatability to perhaps a broader audience, as well as a deep personal faith. So he could really connect on every level. And that's what came through, I think, and the way that he could speak from a personal perspective, but also in the way that he would elicit that from the people he was meeting. And in the morning, he was presenting alongside Sheikh Kandia, if I remembered his name correctly. And I think between them, again, you've got that sort of more personal, almost acting as the viewer, someone who's turned up to worship on a really special day with some of the more deeper theological knowledge that the Sheikh was able to bring. And Jason was able just to ask the right question at the right time and very lightly hold the audience's hand throughout the service in the morning. So I think his range was just enormous. And of course, he is an incredibly experienced, seasoned live broadcaster. So he brought all of that background to both of these shows. And I mean, I thought he was incredible, just wonderful to watch. It was a feat. I realized I could just never do what he does.
Yeah, he was fantastic. I don't know if there's any more comments from Zulfi or Aaqil about Jason's role.
I think Daisy summed it up perfectly. I mean, he's just, you know, he is. I'm biased because I know him, and he's great. He's great, and he's been on a journey himself, and that's the beauty of it. He's been on a religious journey himself, and you know, and I think he appeals, as Daisy quite rightly says, he appeals to everybody, Muslims and non-Muslims, and lots of people who have got no idea that he was a Muslim.
Beth, if I may, just from a religious point of view, I think it worked out really well in the end, the two programs.
Yeah.
But actually, there was a level of risk there as well.
Yes.
A huge level of risk. Because the morning session was very sacred, was very spiritual. It was within the mosque setting. And the evening event could have been very different and might have contradicted everything, but it didn't. And what was nice about it was there was a balance of, here we are spiritually as Muslims, celebrating our faith and remembering the Creator. And in the end, we're a family and friends that come together to enjoy the celebration. And I think that was really important. We got both of those messages across, very balanced, very sympathetic, and with respect. And looking back at it now, you know, I think, you know, I'm sure there was a stroke of genius there as well. But then to have people like Jason Mohammed, who did the morning session and the afternoon session and was sympathetic, I think was a stroke of genius as well, getting him there as an anchor.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Zulfi. I've got my next question is for you as well, if I may. So, Zulfi, what did it mean to the mosque and the wider Bradford community? So, what's the feedback been like locally since the broadcast and since the party?
The impact has been profound. And not just for the Muslims, but I think people from all walks of life, Muslims and non-Muslims. People reached out to say how moved they were. for many of our congregation, especially the elders, seeing our mosque and our prayers on BBC One during Eid was something that they never imagined that they'd live to see. But it also gave our young people pride too, seeing their identity reflected back with respect and not stereotype. There's been a real sense of visibility, of being part of a wider national story for Bradford. A city often in the headlines for the wrong reasons. This was a moment of light, of joy and peace and unity that broadcast to an entire country. And that's something, we won't forget.
Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing that, Zulfi. And I think this, this pair of shows had such a major presence across BBC platforms, local and national. They obviously meant a huge amount to the local community. You obviously put yourself on the line significantly here. I want to, I suppose in particular, ask Daisy and Aaqil how that was coordinated and what kind of reach and response did you both see in relation to this?
Well, as I mentioned just now, that some of the viewer feedback, we had a huge amount of people writing in to say how much they loved the programmes, which is obviously really heartening and encouraging when people take the time to write and tell you that they've loved something. More often than not, it's to write and say what they haven't liked. And I was struck by the range of people who wrote in as well, both in age, but also faith background. A few people talked about the fact that as Christians or from other faiths, they had no idea what a service of Muslim worship looked like, and that they felt invited into that space and into that world for the programming in the morning, and had come away having learned a lot about the faith. And one person contacted us to say, thank you for the programmes, because for the first time they felt seen on mainstream media. And that for me is the whole point. That's what this is about. It's about trying to create a better sense of information, both about the British Muslim community, about the faith, about practice, about family stories, and to that wider point about just religious literacy, which I often go on and on about and can sound a bit dry, but what I mean by that is to broaden people's understanding of often their nearest neighbours who might have a different cultural faith background, but nevertheless look at what you can each bring to that conversation or exchange on the street. And I think a programme like this goes some way to just bringing a slightly different perspective to audiences.
Thanks so much, Daisy. I don't know if Aaqil or Zulfi want to come back in here, or...
Do you mind me with the question again? Sorry. Beth.
Yeah, so I suppose we were really thinking about the huge impact that this pairing of shows, as well as the broader platform, had locally and nationally, and really how that was coordinated and what sort of responses and reach you saw in relation to both these shows.
I can talk about the reach from the BBC in terms of before the conversation. So because Daisy set up a whole there was lots of people interested, and actually you've got to coordinate these things. So Daisy set up and chaired a kind of like a grouping of people that wanted to do things across the BBC, on different TV platforms, radio platforms, local, national, etc. And then on behalf of Firecracker and Amplify, because I was up in the north all the time, obviously, I kind of like just did the liaison with that, and we had lots of meetings, and the relationship in particular with in the north with BBC Look North, with BBC Leeds, etc., was really good. I mean, I can't speak enough greatly enough about the guys were really good. I mean I knew some of them from a different lifetime ago, but that was irrelevant. The fact is they wanted to do this, and actually what they really wanted was, and I think it goes to some of the things that Daisy said about some of the letters that they've got. They themselves wanted to get it right, because they know the communities that they have to serve. And so they wanted to get it right. They wanted access. And there were little moments where, for instance, I remember BBC Leeds wanted to be, Zulfi will remember this, BBC Leeds wanted to do the 9 till 12 show on, in the mosque. And I had to have the most delicate conversation on the planet and say, you can't do it in the mosque. And they goes, well, can't you just ask the mosque? I said, no, I don't even need to ask them to tell you can't do it inside the mosque, because you can't be playing, here's the latest track from Coldplay or whatever, inside a mosque, because music, it's a sacred space, all these kind of things. So in the end, I think we got them a place around the corner at the Sweet Centre, and they did base themselves there for 3 hours. They did the show from the Sweet Centre in Bradford, and that was again a lot of conversations, a lot of groundwork, but you cannot, it shows you the importance of I don't work for the BBC now, so I can say it right without, I'm not getting paid to say it. It shows you the importance of having an organization that actually has that many kind of platforms and the ability to kind of like corral people around a subject, because then whether it be network television or local radio or whatever, local TV or whatever, what you saw was this incredible kind of programming around it. And the one show going live, while the one show was live, they came into it while we were doing our rehearsals for the evening show, and they did all of that. The BBC Look North show at 6 o'clock was live from Bradford in the city centre, and they came into our show, and all of that. That's the kind of thing that gives you the kind of presence that you don't normally get when you just do something for another broadcaster. When you do it with the BBC, when the BBC gets behind something, it's unbeatable. And I think that was one of the things that really stood out for me, was the fact that everybody just wanted to be involved, sometimes too enthusiastically, for us. But because we're as an independent, you're just trying to make your show sometimes. But you know that you've got this obligation to the BBC as well to work with all the other colleagues. And you just got to find that happy balance, which I think we did, and that's why I think it worked really well.
Great, thank you. Zulfi, I don't know if there's anything you want to add there. No,
I think Daisy summed it up nicely, and Aaqil's topped it up. And
what a great description. Well, thank you so much. In a few moments, I'm going to invite people to add questions into the chat if they would like to, but I wanted to ask about legacy a little bit. So I'll come to you first, Zulfi, if I may, but what legacy do you hope these programmes leave for audiences, for interfaith understanding, and for the BBC? But I'll come to Zulfi first, and then I'll go to Daisy and Aaqil, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. I think the point that Daisy mentioned about religious literacy, I think this is really, really important, that whichever shape or form it takes, whether it's a religious service in Ramadan, whatever we can create as creators as well, and programming that actually addresses some of that, I think is really, really important. I feel this opening your doors and removing the stereotypes. I think the communities generally, and not just my mosque, but homes and places of worship and our lives, we should be more open to that. I don't know. I'd say we need to definitely do it again. It needs to happen, and not just by the BBC, but everybody should be doing it. It should not be just exclusive.
Well, that's amazing. That's amazing to hear. And indeed, my next question, which I'll come to in just a moment, was: would you do it again? And what might be different if you did? But that's something that I can come back to you on in just a moment, if that's okay. And I'll just move across to Daisy and Aaqil and ask about legacy from their perspective. So thank you so much. I'll be with you again in a moment, Zulfi. Daisy, may I come to you first? For you, what do you hope for the legacy of these programmes for the BBC, for audiences, for understanding and interfaith literacy?
Well, I hope it's helped to nudge the conversation forward, and that's something that continues, and that people now might seek other programmes and other content as a result of this. I also hope that it will mean perhaps audiences who haven't historically always come to the BBC because they don't feel very well represented by the organisation now might think about coming to look at some other programmes as well. And then the other thing that, I mean, I'm trying to work quite closely across the platforms, having built these connections and these brilliant relationships, to look at where else we can join up to amplify significant moments in the calendar. And as Zulfi just said, the Muslim calendar, but also all of the major faiths. And that's something that we're doing in a number of different ways. So I think there are some connections and conversations now that will stay. And as well as that, what I really hope to do is work with BBC Children's and Education. And already, again, there is some content that they're taking to repurpose for the classroom. And we're talking about whether there's a place in the classroom for this, or clips perhaps from this, to help supplement the curriculum. So I think quite a lot of our output in documentaries and in live television, particularly when it comes to worship, can actually really benefit what teachers are trying to achieve with religious awareness and literacy, particularly for the younger years, with something like this. So there are a number of different things that are already happening, or that I hope will happen. So there is a legacy.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Daisy. And Aaqil, I'm going to come to you next, if I may.
Well, that last point of Daisy's is a really good point, because my daughter's a history teacher and also teaches RE along as a side little hustle while she's also as a history teacher, and they're using this that already. They're already using it, because where else are you going to get something of this nature to explain it? So I mean, she's using it because she's my daughter, obviously, but the thing is, I think she's not alone, is the honest truth. And I think curating something for them is important. And I could bore everybody to death about writing a strategy on this 15 years ago, blah blah blah, but you know what, that doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, these things have to happen for you to have the footage, to have the conversation, to be able to deliver something in the first place. And for that, I'm really, very grateful. And so all of the things that Zulfi and Daisy have said, I completely second. What I would just say is that, obviously, you know, what I think the impact that that particularly the morning show, I think the impact of actually the live prayers, live Eid prayers, and the impact it's had for Muslims as well as non-Muslims, but particularly for Muslims, if we talk about that group of 4.5 million and growing in the country, is that what it showed was the acceptance that we exist as equals, and that this isn't something about us. This is us, as take us or leave us. This is us in the calendar, feeling that actually we're significant, and also, you know, and then alongside that, the kind of like, it's a revealing of what actually goes on inside a mosque for non-Muslims. So that's very useful, but mainly for Muslims, it was that sense that actually this is our big thing, that you now have to, we are the same as everybody else. We're not an addition, we're the same thing, or you're not talking about us. It's not about politics, it's not about conflict. It's showing you what we really believe and what really happens inside a mosque. And I think in terms of legacy, and you would say, oh, the businessman in me is bound to say that, right? I think that we should be doing it every year, personally, or, you know, because, and going to different kind of communities. You know, I'm sat here today in Cardiff for work, and the Cardiff community, you know, Jason's story is very similar in here. You've got one of the oldest Muslim communities in the UK in Cardiff. You know, no one knows that. And they're very diverse, you know, lots of Asians, but lots of people from Africa, but people from the Middle East, from Yemen and places like that, who came here in the late 19th century, early 20th century. It's a different experience to what you would see in Bradford. And so for me, that legacy would be, yes, we keep on doing it, but we also keep on illustrating and using it as a vehicle to illustrate that we actually have been here a long time in some instances. And not only have we been here a long time, we're also very, very diverse. So what I would hope this does is actually it helps reinforce that point that I think is missing for so much of the rhetoric that we have to put up with. And that is, there is no such thing as a Muslim community. There are Muslim communities. And that's what this, I think, showed. We were in the homes and in the mosque of a community, but there are other communities who can relate to that, but they've also got their own stories that they want to tell.
Thank you so much, and I'm going to return, if I may, to the point that Zulfi made about doing it again. You've shared some ideas, Aaqil and Daisy and Zulfi, already about what that might look like, and where possible locations of a continuation if this were to happen again. Zulfi, have you got any particular thoughts about how you might like to build, for example, on what has happened this year in the sort of City of Culture and for your mosque?
Yeah, would you do it again? Without hesitation, yes. But next time, I'd want even more of our voices and stories woven in, especially from women and young people, and also the different school of thoughts within our faith. Eid is such a rich, multifaceted celebration, and I feel we've only just scratched the surface.
Thank
Agree.
you.
And I just wanted to add to what Zulfi said about trying to include more women and young people. I think is really important, because that was something we're so aware of, and also some of the stereotypes that still perpetuate around that. And that was something that I know the mosque works really hard to be an inclusive mosque, and there are prayer facilities and facilities for women. And on the day, I mean, Aaqil could probably speak in a bit more detail because he was really across this. There was the space at the top of the building for women and children. There wasn't an enormous turnout that day, I think, for all very understandable reasons. But my hope would be, once this becomes, more of a regular thing to see, and there's more awareness and more understanding from everybody, perhaps there are other parts of the different Muslim communities, women and children as well, who feel like they couldn't come to.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got time, I think, for one more question, but before I move on, I just want to check that there's no more comments that anyone from the panel would like to add. I don't want to rush anyone.
I think what's really important that this was an Eid celebration, and it was focused on the Muslim community, but really this is about people of all communities and different communities, and faith and no faith. It just happened to be that we were showcasing an event that was Eid, and it was from a mosque. It could have been anywhere. And I think what this does, it brings people together, and we can carry on with conversations like this. We've kind of we've broke the ceiling, we've smashed the glass ceiling, and now it's those conversations that Daisy can have with school children, and Aaqil's daughter can go into school with, and people now understand what a mosque looks like. So hopefully what we've done is we've really given the opportunity to people to share their stories and come back with new ideas. I'm sure there's great ideas that we haven't even thought of.
Thank you. Thanks so much. That's a really important reflection, I think, on what was achieved through this fantastic collaboration and what that means as well. My last question to you all, if I may, is to ask personally what you've learned through making these programs, because this sounded like a complex, fantastic collaboration, but I'm positive there will have been learnings that you've all taken from that. So it'd be great if we could finish off with you sharing those for audiences here. Daisy, may I come to you first, please?
I mean, there's a lot. I learned a lot. I learned much more about theology, practice, ritual around Eid. But my main takeout, and has come back to me while we've been talking today, and it's something that Zulfi just said, that this is about people. This is about people and this happened to be a Muslim celebration and a Muslim worship service in a mosque, but it, you know, it could be, you can find those sentiments, those relationships, that reflection, that reverence in all sorts of other locations and places, that kind of generosity of spirit, which is what I really felt throughout the whole process and on the day, just being welcomed so wholeheartedly when we didn't have to be, you know, that it was risky and there was a leap of faith, and I was aware of that all the way through. But the generosity and open-heartedness that I felt I came across at every step of the way was just a brilliant way to work. And that's what I will take away from this, is to approach things that can seem risky and difficult with that spirit of open-heartedness, caution, and asking the right questions. It's not that everyone was skipping around in the Pollyanna style going, this will all be fine, but really to give people the benefit of the doubt and see the best in one another. I experienced that all the way through, and that's something that I'll really take away.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Daisy. I'm going to move to Aaqil next, if I may, please.
Ooh. I learned that I can eat a lot of biryani because I was in that mosque. They were feeding me literally biryani every night. I think I've still got some in my freezer. That's how much they were
I'm jealous.
But no, but joking aside, actually, that was quite an important thing. One of the things, I suppose, you know, just a reminder of how humble you need to be when you're in people's space and you're trying to convince them to do something, and wanting to do it for the right reasons rather than convince them because you're just desperate to do something, but it's the right thing to do, and reassure them rather than convince, I suppose. And that kind of humility is quite important. And I think the big learning is, you know, there are lots of things that are transferable. So, you know, I mean, this was the first ever time it's ever been done. But the fact of the matter is, you know, we had a team, you know, myself and Daisy, and then the director of the OB director and the OB producer, and all of us had worked on big events before, not Muslim ones, but big events, live events, you know, whether it be Christmas Day or the Pope's visit or whatever. So therefore, you know, those skills are actually transferable. And what you have to do then is just actually have that, as long as you have that relationship and the knowledge and experience of the ability to work with the mosque and knowledge about Islam and theology and all those kind of things that are really important, then you can do a kind of service like this. It doesn't have to be impossible, because the skill set is there in the industry. It's actually, how do you harness it and get it to work in the correct way? And one of the things, and the other thing I think I really, really take away from this is, you know, we've all made lots of good friends as well in the industry over the years, and also lots of good friends in Bradford for that matter, you know. And so whether it be the Zulfi or the mosque, or, you know, I remember when I popped into the mosque after a few weeks ago for Friday prayers. When I was in Bradford, I popped into the mosque, and they were like, literally, it was like as if we were still working on this show. And I walked in, and they were sat there, and we were chatting, and half of me was expecting to get biryani. In the end, I just had a cup of tea with him, you know. But the thing is, the friendships that we've built, I've learned a lot from that, which is that actually you can sometimes, you know, you don't want to carry on relationships after you've done something, whatever. But with this one, I think we'll carry on being friends for a long time, quite frankly, because we all learned so much, and the trust that we put into each other. You know, we all had the burden of it was really, really big. And I think because of that, you know, I think we're battle hardened and battle scarred, and we'll be hanging on to each other forever, probably, you know.
Thank you, Aaqil. And last but certainly by no means least, Zulfi, what have you taken away from this? What was the key thing that you'd say that you'd learned from the experience?
I think being on a RTS platform here, I think I probably did not appreciate what's involved behind the scenes. And the question for me was, why hasn't this been done before? Daisy's already alluded to that. But it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, very expensive to do a live broadcast. And the amount of work and energy and planning that goes on behind the scenes to create something like this is probably something I never, ever appreciated. and I've got now an insight and understanding, and I'll probably be a bit more sympathetic in future to broadcasters. But now at least we know what can be done. But really, what's really important here is leadership. I think leadership is very, very important. And through leadership comes relationships, and through that comes trust. And I think on both of those, I've walked away a bit more of trust in broadcasters than I probably had before. But at the same time, not taking away the effort and the commitment, and that goes behind the scenes to make something like this. And people like Daisy who have to believe in you, and put their trust in you. So I think it's a combination of all of those things. And without that, that wouldn't be impossible. So for me, that was a huge learning. And I hope this is a start of many more conversations and broadcast and airtime that all our communities and marginalised communities and minority communities of all walks in life need more.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Zulfi. And a huge thank you for such a brilliant panel. I think actually we could go on for at least another half an hour. I'm sure you're all exhausted and probably are thinking, hang on, we're ready for a cup of tea. However, it is time to bring it to a close. But yeah, huge thank you to Zulfi, Karim, Aaqil Ahmed, Daisy, Scalchi, for taking us behind the scenes of such an extraordinary pair of programmes. I think this conversation has been incredibly thoughtful, incredibly generous, and I think it's reminded us as well why public service storytelling is so important, and when it's done well, why it really, really matters. I must say thank you to people who have joined us today online. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you would like to continue the conversation, please do follow RTS Yorkshire for more events, and please do share the work and the insight from today far and wide. There will be a recording which will be made available from today's session, but huge thank you to our panel. Huge thanks to everyone who's come along to listen, and please enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks so much again for joining us from RTS Yorkshire. And
thanks to you, Beth.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
facilitating a conversation. It's been really interesting. Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you all very much indeed.
Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.